Good day, welcome to Chaste, where we do modest, stylish, and helpful clothing for you and your family. Today we're going to be doing a knife pleat skirt using 2-inch knife pleats. So let's get started. So here we have our material to make our knife pleat skirt. We're going to do 2 panels for the front and back, 1 zipper, and 1 pocket. So I bought 3 yards of material, and I'm going to be using a 30-inch waist. So what we want to do is multiply 30 by 3 to get the width of our skirt, so that we can pleat it, plus 4 inches of seam allowance, which leaves us with 94 inches of material. So we're just going to cut out 94 inches. So 3 yards will be more than enough to do what we're setting out to do here today. So we're going to be measuring out our 94 inches of material. So now what we're going to do is we're going to cut this in half. And that will make our 2 panels. So now we have our waist width. Now we're going to cut the length of our skirt. I want my skirt to be 33 inches from the waist, and I want my hem to be 3 inches. And I'm going to add 1 inch for seam allowance at the top and 1 inch for seam allowance at the bottom. So we're just going to cut 38 inches of length. Okay, 33, 38. So we're going to use the excess of the bottom of our skirt for our pockets, and the excess or the leftover material from our skirt we're going to use to make our waistband. So I'm going to be doing a 2-inch waistband to match the 2-inch pleats. So we want to cut out 8 inches so that we can fold our waistband appropriately. We're also going to cut out the width or the circumference around our waist of our waistband. Since I'm doing a 30-inch waist, I'm going to measure 32 inches and cut that out. The extra 2 inches is for our seam allowance. So here we're going to fold in our edges to meet each other, 2 inches on each side. And we're going to iron that out so that it's nice and flat and easy to manage. So in one side of our material, we're going to sew the pocket on. I like to sew the pocket on about 6 inches down from the waist. That's where it's most comfortable for me. And we're gonna sew that in about 1 inch because we're using 1 inch of seam allowance. So we'll sew this on one side, and then we'll sew the other pocket on the other side, and then we're gonna sew the two together. Now that we have one side of our pocket sewn in, we're going to take the other panel of our material from the waist, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Now that we have our two sides of our pocket sewn in, we're going to sew down this one side of our material, and we're going to sew around the edge of the pocket. So we'll go in 1 inch of seam allowance, and we'll go all the way down to where the pocket ends, and then we'll start to hem around our pocket all the way around, and then we'll continue all the way around to the end here, and then we'll sew straight down. Okay, now we have one side of our material sewn down with our pocket in place. What we're going to do next is we want this pocket to be on our right side and the zipper on our left. But before we get into all of that, we're going to start putting in our pleats, starting from the first seam that we have here. But just before we do all that, we're just going to finish our ends on this side so that when we do the pleats, there's nothing interfering with it, because we do have to sew over the top. So we're just going to finish this end here to make sure all the seams are inside and in case that no unraveling happens. So we're just going to cut about half or quarter of an inch down on one side of the seam, and we're going to use the other side to fold over it and sew it down. And we'll do the same for the inside here and the inside here. We'll have to cut it, and we'll use a zigzag stitch to finish the end of the pocket. now we're done with all the finishing on that side. All our seams are encased. So we'll start our pleats. So what we'll do is measure 2 inches, and on each, for every 2 inches we make a notch so that we can see. Just make a little cut in the top of the material so that when we're folding it, we'll know how far to fold the pleats. Now we'll take each pleat. We're going to be taking up from 2 inches, making a 2-inch pleat, and folding it across, and then we'll pin it just like that. Then we'll go across 2 inches, and then we'll take up 2 inches again. You'll see your little cuts in here to show you how far your pleat should go and where you are to make the folds. So now we have our pleats pinned in, and we're going to leave the last one empty because this is where our zipper is going to go. So we'll show you how all of that comes together a little later on. So we'll move to the other side, and we're going to continue the pleats going across. So we're going to do the same thing that we just did here. And we're just going to go the other way. We're going to cut our notches, and then we're going to make our folds, and then we're going to pin them in all the way to the end. So now that we finished our other side, we're also going to leave this end open as well. And right now we're just going to sew down the entire line to keep our pleats in place. So you can actually sew right over the top of your pins. Just sew over them very slowly so that they don't hit the needle too fast and break your sewing needle. Make sure that all of your folds are flattened out underneath, or turn the material over so that when you're sewing them that they all get sewn down, because we don't want to be sewing the material and something like this happens and we sew over the top of it. So just make sure underneath that everything is flat and in its respective place. We'll just take out all our pins and get ready to place in our waistband. Okay, so I realized that it would be better to have a button on this skirt because of the pleat. So we want it to look pleated all the way around, and because the pleats and the zipper are going to conflict each other, we're going to sew the pleats and we're going to hem down and leave an opening, and the button will close the opening with the pleat. So everything will look pleated. So we'll start doing that. So I'm going to sew these pleats in place also, but I'm just going to sew them in a way that the ends are exposed at the back of here. So I'm just going to make a stitch just right there to leave it, these two pieces open. And I'm going to do the same with the other side. I'm just going to leave that part completely open and just sew that down the opposite way, because this one is going to end up being covered by this pleat like that. So we'll need a little room to go underneath. So this side, one side, is going to be open pleat, a little bit wider, and this side is just going to come as a pleat to the end. So I'm just going to finish this little edge here, and then I'm just going to finish it down to about this much, so that when I put in the waistband, this part is all tucked inside. So I'm just going to hem that about 4 to 6 inches down. So we're going to sew the waistband onto the part, starting from the part of our material that has the last pleat that's going to go underneath the other pleat. So the one that has the very wide pleat, the very wide box pleat, this is where we're going to be sewing on our waistband. But before we do that, we're just going to finish the edges for about 4 to 6 inches down. So we're just going to roll hem this. So I just stitched this fold down just to hold it in place while we put our waistband on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to stitch our waistband on, but first we need to pin it in place. So we're going to open up our waistband, and this is the line we're going to use to stitch onto a little lower than this line of our skirt. So we want to pin everything in place to make sure that it gets sewn on straight. So we'll face our waistband with the wrong side facing us, and we'll place the line just a little bit below that line, and we'll just keep going along and pinning, and we can kind of see about 1 inch of material showing all the way up, and we'll just start pinning it. We want to make sure that this edge is not showing and that we leave space for another seam to finish the waistband itself. So now we're going to sew all along this line we're just gonna go a little bit lower than that line, just a tad bit, and we're just gonna sew the waistband on all the way up. So now we're going to take the two ends of our waistband and we're going to spread everything out, and we're going to turn it outside, right side, wrong side out, inside out. We're going to turn it inside out, and we're going to sew a very narrow gap all the way down, because we don't want to sew this part into it. So we just want to sew that down so that when we turn it inside out, we have a finished look. Voila. So now we have this finished edge here, and we go along and do the other side. So now we're going to hem in the back side of our waistband. So we want to slide everything down just a tad bit so that it hooks, and we're going to go right over that same line all the way across. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut an opening for the button. Now we're going to take two other pieces of material that are about a little bit smaller than the waistband. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut a slit in them. So we're going to take one side, and we're going to get a needle and thread. And we're gonna sew the inside edges of one side to one side of our little square of material.
Just go
Drink
again.
water, okay? It's good for you. Water is life. So now we have our buttonholes on either side. And so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna fold them into the waistband. So you're gonna end up with something looking like this on both sides. Pretty much. Now we're gonna sew these two together right along the same line so that our thread is hidden. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come from the inside to the outside so that our knot ends up inside the material. And we're gonna come right out of this line here. And then all the way around as close to the edge as we can. We just want to make a very tiny space like that, and we want to do the same on the other side. Make a very tiny, oops, toe. Okay, so we sewed all the way around our buttonhole. Now we're just going to try to get our knot in between, somewhere where it's going to be hidden enough. And the next thing we do is sew our button onto the other side. Now we have our button on. This is what the side is going to look like. So now all we need to do is stitch up the side and finish it, and then hem our skirt up. Now we got our skirt pretty much put together. This is how it looks on the sides, the pocket. So now we're just gonna sew these two inside pieces together just a little bit. Right, and now we're ready to hem up our skirt. So first we'll do a 1-inch roll hem. And now that we're all hemmed, we're gonna do another hem. We're just gonna fold up and sew 3 inches. If you like this video, you can like and subscribe to our channel. Other links to social media and our Etsy store will be in the description box below. Is that too lazy? Are you still videoing?